The Cult of Us, a simplistic overview of a personal supposition. What is society? Not a force or righteous whole. Society is what the conscious part of certain animals call large groupings of themselves, amassed under the collective desire for communication, comforts, and conveniences. The masses always develop a smaller group that dictates the parameters of behavior for the rest. These governing groups are not righteous, and yet they are appealed to as being so unconsciously by many within the masses, even as these same people are often consciously critical of them. One of the core causes of such unstable reverence is the concept of justice. Systems of justice essentially concern maintenance utilized by the smaller group, made up of members of the larger group. Righteousness is applied to such systems, though they only function as support for a status quo, which is always centered around the collective desire for communication, comforts, and conveniences. Ideals develop in these groupings and are fostered through the smaller group. These ideals may be religious or secular, but are often a combination of both. Central ideals concern conscious abstractions such as rights, right and wrong, freedom, and justice. These abstractions are often given validation through other concepts such as ownership, free will, and authority. Because none of these things can be said to exist beyond the temporal process of conscious thought, and because conscious thought cannot be measured or demonstrated to exist metaphysically, that is, beyond or somehow outside of biochemical and electrochemical phenomena, none can be said to represent an actuality independent from the animal condition. One could rationally suggest that the entire foundation of any society is religious in nature due to the reliance on absolutism, fantastical, and even supernatural beliefs. How else to perceive a system based upon the notion that authority and ownership can even exist at all in a species of animals among multitudes that are set into being in motion by forces completely beyond their control? How does one own anything? By what virtue? Being born? Being conditioned to believe so? Where does one's authority spring from? God? Gods? Which God or gods? Where is the evidence for the existence of such beings? And if not gods, then what? The magical ability to become a god in one's own mind? The supernatural power of commonality of belief? Only blind faith and irrational or delusional thinking could allow for such notions, as no substantial evidence nor cogent argument exist to validate them. In fact, all evidence seems to press upon the idea that human beings have no control, authority, or ownership, but are actually controlled and, one could argue, owned by the seemingly indifferent authority of cosmic patterns that flow in the order of causes and effects. And then it follows that if there can be no ownership, there can be no theft. If there is no actual law, then there can be no crime. And if there is no such thing as a free will, then there can be no validation for any judgment of any action at all. What is murder but a word for a type of killing that some people believe should not occur, while the very existence of an opposing perspective strongly suggests that such a thing is merely a matter of personal taste? Of course, it is essential, even for those who are capable of rational examination and discussion, to irrationally deny such ideas, because these people rely on the luxuries, comforts, and conveniences that the fragile or imaginary foundations of societies are built upon. Why should such ideas be considered controversial or subversive when they are rooted in logic and reason as opposed to adversarial views which are built upon passions, prejudices, biases, and faith? I will make the claim that society is a form of religion that human animals worship due to their reliance on fantastical or delusional thinking for functionality and the collective desire for communication, comforts, and conveniences which are rooted in behavioral needs. I will go further and suggest that all human thoughts and actions are superficial responses to complex, morally and politically indifferent unconscious patterns or forces. Patterns without moral direction cause behaviors which, when analyzed, become politicized and moralized. Wars are not caused by political reasons and reactions, but rather humans are driven to fight wars for utterly non-rational reasons, and respond with ideas concerning the whys due to developed needs and desires to do so that are themselves without rational purpose or reason. Humans are particle pattern phenomena, forced to act by other connected patterns, and consciousness is a chemical collective that has no freedom by the very nature of its restricted form. There can be no free will, as the will is actually itself a cage of feelings. And there can be no free thought, as the very act of thinking ensnares feelings in the fixed contours of language. Symbolic communication necessitates slavery of thought. and thought is always rooted in and directed by unconscious patterns that are completely beyond the control of the effects that perceive them, that is, the effects that are human consciousness. One implication of this idea is that all moral beliefs are matters of prescribed taste, and that all judgments are irrational movements of patterns of which the moral animal is but a fragment, and the mind but an aspect. We seem to be ruled by indifferent fates, and yet we will live as though we have rights and freedoms despite the complete lack of evidence for either, precisely because we are forced to by the patterns that precede us. And we will judge each other not simply because we feel the need to do so regardless of the absurdity of such things, but because of the mysterious yet seemingly amoral and apolitical changes in the patterns that make up matter. What is society? A religious ritual of conscious thought that has no rational reason to be, and arguably no discernible ultimate purpose. All ideologies and moral ideals are religious in nature, and we are all slaves in the church of biological pattern changes. We own nothing. We have authority over nothing. We are not in control of anything. We are only ever progressing towards the inevitable violent transformation of death and decay. We do not point our fingers to the moon, we are the finger being pointed. Concerning my species, in emotion I hold many contrasting prejudices. In thought I have one central creed: question thyself. This does not refer to me alone, but to the collective cult of us.